Ani Kinawea, Jessica Bolduc, Indigenous, Bawatin, Obajawan, Ndonjaba, Makwan Dodem, Ojibwe, Anishinaabe, Kwe, and Dao. Hello everyone, my name is Jessica Bolduc, and I am Anishinaabe French from the Batchewana First Nation, Robinson-Huron Treaty, and I'm a member of the Bear Clan. I'm really happy to be welcomed onto the territory of the Maliseet and Mi'kmaq people. So to that, I say Chimigwech, Walalin, to be here today, from my ancestors to yours, from my community to yours, from my heart to your heart. My work with the 4 Hours Youth Movement brings me all over this country. Respect, reciprocity, reconciliation, and relevance. Those are our values. And as young people, we are restoring Canada by centering Indigenous history of the past, the stories of the present, and the visions for the future. And we're modeling a new relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. Through this work, while I'm not home very often, I am welcomed onto the territory of many Indigenous nations, and I'm happy to see a resurgence of protocol and land acknowledgements by both Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. The acknowledgement situates us in relation to each other in creation and is a small micro-gesture towards writing relations. With this work, I also take a lot of cabs, and I talk to a lot of cab drivers. And I like to say sometimes that the progress of our country's path towards reconciliation is measured by what conversations I find myself having on the way to or from the airport. So this winter, while visiting in Montreal, I had taken to asking my cab drivers what languages they spoke, on the hypothesis that it would likely be many since we were in Quebec, and they were speaking to me in English. So if my math was correct, it would be probably at least 2. So sure enough, these folks were multilingual on average, and they would ask, "How many languages do you speak?" 1, I would reply, but I'm hoping to learn more. You see, my language, Anishinaabe, at one time was illegal to speak here in Canada. It was also the target of assimilative policy by the Canadian government through such things as the Indian Act and residential schools, and has been under the threat of extinction since colonization. When I began, I introduced myself in my traditional language. Aside from this greeting and a few words here and there, I do not know the language fluently and have very few opportunities to learn it. It makes me sad, and it makes me ashamed because I am told over and over again that language is more than a way to communicate. For Indigenous people, language is a way of life. And I want to think, feel, and love in Anishinaabe. But alas, I'm a product of assimilation, a status card carrying educated Indian who doesn't speak her language or actively practice her culture. I grew up Canadian by default, but I wish I had been given the choice to grow up Anishinaabe, because I think parts of me have been lost in translation. Maybe those are the parts that would help me save the world. Well, maybe not me, but others like me who have lost their parts in transition too. I worry about Canada, I really do, because if parts of me are lost, then that means a part of Canada is lost. Because the Canada I desire is multilingual. We are language deprived, and not only are we starving Indigenous peoples of our language, we are starving this country as a whole. Despite the richness of 50+ Indigenous languages that are spoken today, and the diversity of new languages being brought here from all over the world, we are still a bilingual country. Barely bilingual. Sorry. And like a monoculture crop, which is susceptible to disease, we are setting Canada up to be wiped out from the disease that destroys our capacity for new ideas, creative thought, and innovation. And so as we move into the next 150 years of Canada, I desire to create a country that has all its parts. And we can start by restoring Indigenous language. So a country where I am offered all of the supports that are allowed to people learning English or French, where I have equal funding and access to learn my language, where I can take time from work and even be paid to learn Anishinaabe, where my nephews and their classmates, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, can take Indigenous language classes and don't have to sacrifice other subjects to do so, where Indigenous children can go to immersion schools and learn about their culture completely surrounded by a language that will positively shape their growth and sense of self, where the Prime Minister speaks all 50-plus official languages. Well, at least 3, depending on what territory that they happen to be in. And a country where the languages that belong to the land, the languages that are indigenous to here, are celebrated for the resilience and ingenuity that they bring to this country, rather than treated as afterthoughts and tokens. That is the Canada that I desire, and I need Canadians to desire it too. And a path forward has been laid for us in the calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and the solutions lie with communities themselves. For Indigenous peoples, learning our language is more than just being multilingual. For us, it's about cultural identity, it's about healing intergenerational trauma, and it is the root of our belonging and worldview. Because the truth is, for Indigenous people, language saves lives. Mano b'madzawin, the good life. This is a concept in my language that talks about our right to live a good life, our relationship to our communities, to our land, to our spirits and ourself, a sense of belonging. You aren't broken parts, you are a whole. You deserve a good life. A year ago in May, a group of Anishinaabe young people, including myself, occupied our local MP's office. We occupied the office in ceremony over 4 days, bringing awareness to the epidemic of suicide among youth in Indigenous communities. We stayed for 4 days to acknowledge there are 4 parts of self: mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual, and we need to take care of all of these to live a good life. Because for Indigenous people, when the treaties were made, we were taken away the opportunity to live a good life. But there is hope, and hope is a word that is universal in all languages. And because of the resistance movements and the work of elders, young people, and community, we still have our languages. And so I have hope to find my way back to Anishinaabe, because for every word I speak in my language, I am finding the parts of myself that will make me whole. And for every word that I speak in my language, while I may never be able to speak fluently, I will do my part, because hope and action is what will make a better country. Mino b'madzawin for everyone. So that one day a young Indigenous person can stand up here and deliver a Walrus Talk fluently speaking their language, and that they feel seen, and that they feel heard, and that they feel that their language belongs here in Canada, here on the lands where it has been spoken for not 150, but 15,000 years. Miigwech.